We are holding on page 46a. We've been learning about the laws of Shehachiyanu, the laws of blessings on mitzvahs, and not only regarding Sukkah, but other mitzvahs as well. We've been learning about Hanukkah, and if we want to, I wanted to go over some of the Tosfos in the commentaries on the side over here. So we're on page 46a. On the top Tosfos, he talks about the law of a person who makes a sukkah for himself. And I maybe touched upon it before. I just want to conclude and go over, finish going over all of the Tosfos. So Tosfos says that the Gemara had mentioned about the Shehachiyanu blessing, that when you bind the lulav, you say Shehachiyanu. When you shake the lulav, you say a bracha al netilas lulav. Now, similarly, but not the same, similarly, there is a law about sukkah, that when you build a sukkah, you say the Shehachiyanu bracha. When you dwell in the sukkah, you do a leishev basukkah. So you have the Shehachiyanu bracha when you build it, and you have the mitzvah bracha that you recite when you do the actual mitzvah. Now, Tosfos over here says that you see from the wording that the only time you do the Shehachiyanu bracha, it's specifically if you are building the sukkah for yourself, or if you're making the lulav for yourself. If you look at the wording, it says it pretty clearly in the Gemara. Tosfos is bothered with, so why is that? Why only when you do it for yourself do you say this bracha Shehachiyanu? In other words, if I made a sukkah, if I built a sukkah for you, I would not be reciting a Shehachiyanu bracha. If I build it for myself, I say a Shehachiyanu bracha. Now, the practical halacha is we wait till later to say the Shehachiyanu bracha. Not everyone builds a sukkah, but what is the reason for the difference? So Tosfos seems to be connecting it. It's a little vague the way Tosfos writes his commentary here, but he seems to be connecting it to, he says, he says, according to the opinion that says that you do not recite a bracha when you build a sukkah, so this is understandable. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. There seems to be an argument about reciting a bracha on building a sukkah. And this argument is mentioned in Yerushalmi. Tosfos brings it. I shouldn't say there seems to be. There is an argument in the Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, and it deals with reciting a bracha, building a sukkah, not the Shehachiyanu bracha. Really, the bracha that we're dealing with is the bracha to build a sukkah. Why would you say a bracha to build a sukkah? Because interestingly enough, there is a semi-mitzvah involved in building a sukkah. What is that semi-mitzvah? It's based on Chag HaSukkos Taseh, that the holiday of Sukkot you should make for yourself. And the understanding is that the wording Taseh means you should build a sukkah. So there is somewhat of a mitzvah in building a sukkah. Now this mitzvah that there is of building a sukkah, the problem is that it's not a completion of a mitzvah. The real element of the mitzvah is when you dwell in the sukkah. So the building of the sukkah, on the one hand, is a mitzvah, could be considered, it's in the category of a mitzvah. On the other hand, it's not the completion of the mitzvah. So because it's not the completion of the mitzvah, there is reason to say that you do not recite a bracha to build a sukkah, because this is not the completion of a mitzvah. It's sort of like just the beginning part of the mitzvah. And when you dwell in it, that would be the completion of the mitzvah. So you're saying a bracha. You would say a bracha then for for the sukkah, for dwelling in the sukkah. But at the time of building the sukkah, this is not the complete mitzvah, and therefore it would not obligate a bracha, would not be appropriate. Now there is an opinion, of course, that argues. So Taisus is basically connecting that to the bracha shehachiyanu. He says when you say a bracha shehachiyanu on your when you build the sukkah, that you can say a bracha shehachiyanu. It's a mitzvah that comes from time to time, and there's reason to say a shehachiyanu, but at the same time, only you're if you're going to be dwelling in it, can we say that you would say a shehachiyanu? The building of the mitzvah is only secondary to the mitzvah of dwelling it, and therefore you wouldn't say a shehachiyanu if you're building it for someone else. In other words, the shehachiyanu bracha is it has to culminate in you dwelling in the. In other words, it has to be end up that you fulfill the mitzvah with this sukkah. So if we can call it that it culminates into a mitzvah, fine. But since we can't really say that, so therefore we're not even going to do a shehachiyanu. So again, the wording of the Gemara, which was basically a tosefta, the wording was that you only when you make it for yourself do you say shehachiyanu. That's true. If you build it yourself, now you don't say a bracha to build the sukkah, because again, it's only the beginning of a mitzvah. But you would say a shehachiyanu as long as it culminates in fulfillment of the completion. In other words, that you're going to be dwelling in this sukkah, then fine. Then you could say the shehachiyanu bracha. But because it's not culminating in you finishing because you built it for someone else, so you're not actually. It's not a beginning of an end that we would say you could say a shehachiyanu. It's you did one part of it, and then someone else is really doing the end. So therefore, the shehachiyanu bracha is not recited. That's the understanding. Taisus then brings another opinion here. And the other opinion that Taisus brings is in Yerushalmi that a person does say a bracha to build a sukkah. Interestingly, it's an interesting thing. We don't normally think of the building of a sukkah as a mitzvah. We normally think of it as a preparation for a mitzvah. But there is an opinion in Yerushalmi, not only is it a mitzvah, but it's even a mitzvah that you say a bracha on. You would say a bracha lasos sukkah. You would say a bracha lasos sukkah. Now, it's a little unclear, but Tosfos might be implying that if you build a sukkah for someone else, if you hold that you say a bracha on building a sukkah, so maybe then you would actually say a shehachiyanu bracha. It's a little vague. It's not clear from Taisus, but it might be that according to that opinion, you would say a shehachiyanu bracha, because that opinion makes a big deal out of this. That the preparation is not only a mitzvah. You're saying a bracha. It's a it's a. I mean, I guess you would still say it's secondary. That's why I'm a little unclear if Taisus wants to tell us to say a shehachiyanu or not, according to that opinion. Again, we don't follow this opinion, so we're only talking in theory. We're not talking in practice. We don't follow this view. But what would that view hold regarding reciting a bracha of reciting a bracha shehachiyanu? So it's a little unclear if you would say a shehachiyanu according, because on the one hand it's still secondary. It's just this opinion holds that you didn't complete. You're not completing the mitzvah, building the sukkah, is secondary to doing the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah. But this opinion holds that even on a secondary element of the mitzvah, you could still recite a bracha, even though you're not completing the mitzvah. That might be the understanding of this opinion. That now in the bracha you would say is lasei sukkah lishmai. The bracha you would say is not to build the sukkah, but to build the sukkah. The way Tosfos says it is you're building the sukkah for him, meaning that I'm fulfilling the mitzvah from the law of arvus, of being like a guarantor. Being that I'm a guarantor. Can you all hear me clearly? Is this clear? Yeah. Okay. So I'm being a guarantor for this other person. So I'm building the sukkah for this person to fulfill the mitzvah. And based on that, again, I'm unclear if that opinion would hold that you could say then a shechiyanu. He holds, I say a bracha on the secondary element of the mitzvah, and even though I'm doing it for someone else, but it's ultimately, he's fulfilling it. So I'm building the sukkah. I'm saying a bracha to build. Maybe I could also say the leishev basuk, the shechiyanu bracha. So anyway, that's the Tosfos over here. And the main point of Tosfos is that we follow the other view that you don't recite a bracha on building the sukkah. And the reason for that is because it's only a secondary element to the actual building, to the actual dwelling in the sukkah. Building of it is only secondary to dwelling. Dwelling is the main part of the mitzvah. It's the completion of the mitzvah. You don't say a bracha on building. You only say a bracha when you dwell in it. And therefore, you would also not say a shehachiyanu bracha if you built it for someone else, because it's not culminating in the ultimate fulfillment of the mitzvah, being that you are not dwelling in it. And so you could say I started it, but what did you start? It didn't culminate in your fulfillment of this mitzvah in its completed state. So someone else maybe is going to dwell in it, but you aren't. Being that that's so, you would not say the shechiyanu bracha because it's not culminating in you dwelling. You built it for someone else. So that's that first Tosfos. The next Tosfos talks about that the bracha that you say is shechiyanu, and I did touch upon this Tosfos also, and I mentioned about the fact that Tosfos says, it's surprising that some mitzvahs have a shechiyanu and some don't. And he lists through a number of mitzvahs. When you recite shechiyanu, when you don't. It's a very interesting way of, in other words, this Tosfos does give us some clarity in the bracha of shechiyanu. He says, they did not require a blessing of shehachiyanu for building for making, I should say, for making tzitzis and for making tefillin, but they did require shehachiyanu for building a sukkah and for putting together a lulav, at least according to our Gemara. So, what is the reason for this difference? So he says, how do you know that tefillin you don't say shehachiyanu? Because when we go over the brachas about tefillin, it doesn't mention the shehachiyanu bracha. The Gemara talks about the blessings on tefillin, and it doesn't mention that when you make the tefillin, you recite a shehachiyanu bracha. Now, what would the reason be to recite a shehachiyanu when you put together tefillin, when you make tefillin? The reason would be that you don't do this this is not a mitzvah every day. Putting on tefillin is a mitzvah every day. It's a daily mitzvah. Tzitzis is a daily mitzvah, but making tefillin is not daily. And maybe there also, when you build a sukkah, you say shachiyanu. Maybe tefillin also, you should say a shachiyanu when you make tefillin. So he says, what about pidyon haben and bris milah? So he says, now, before I get to pidyon about bris milah, Tosfos says, first of all, it doesn't have a bracha at all to make in other words,
right. It's supposed to be for tying the tefillin, making the knot.
Tysus over here brings that for tefillin, there's no bracha lasses tefillin. There's only a bracha lahaniach or al mitzvah tefillin. It doesn't say a bracha lasses. So the understanding is that there's no bracha making tefillin. But not only that, but guess what? Also, it doesn't say. It doesn't say a bracha shachiyanu on the tefillin for the tefillin. So, in other words, the same way that we see from the wording of the Gemara that there's no bracha to make tefillin, we see from the wording of the Gemara that there's no bracha shehachiyanu on making tefillin. So there's no bracha lasis tefillin, there's no bracha shehachiyanu when you do make the tefillin. Now, then Taisa says, what about Pidyon Haben and Bris Milah? So he says, on Pidyon Haben, you do say a shehachiyanu when he brings the source, but he says Bris Milah, he says by Bris Milah, you don't say a shehachiyanu. It talks about the brachas there, but it doesn't mention a shehachiyanu. Now he says, so we have Pidyon Haben, you say shehachiyanu. Bris Milah, you don't. Now I mentioned that in Eretz Yisrael or the Sfardim they do say shehachiyanu, but the Tosfos over here is following the understanding that you don't say shehachiyanu on Bris Milah, and Tosfos is bothered with. So what's the reason? Some yes, some not. You build a sukkah, you put together your lulav, shehachiyanu. You make tefillin, you make tzitzis, no. You do a bris milah, no. You do a pidyon haben, yes. Now, what about Megillah? Megillah, yes. You do shehachiyanu when you read the Megillah. You say shehachiyanu, it's one of the blessings. And what about reading Hallel? Reciting Hallel? No. So what's the rule? So the way Tosfos explains it is that a mitzvah that has simcha, those are the ones that you recite shehachiyanu. And similar to the shehachiyanu bracha that's recited for new vessels. When you have new kalim, when you get a new garment, something new, you say the bracha shehachiyanu. So that same concept applies. That's a type of simcha. So it's when it's a simcha, that's when you get a shehachiyanu. That's when you're able to say a shehachiyanu. Now, how does this explain all of these cases? So to explain the cases, so let's go through each case. So we've got the Megillah reading, that's joy. We've got the Pidyon Haben is joy. We've got making a sukkah and preparing a lulav. So these mitzvahs are connected to the mitzvah of simcha of the holiday, and therefore they're all connected to joy, and therefore you would need to recite a bracha. Now, what we need to figure out is tefillin, making tzitzis, bris milah, and hallel are not associated with joy. What's the reason? So the mitzvah of hallel is performed on holidays. And in addition to holidays, it's recited on Hanukkah and Rosh Chodesh. Now, Hanukkah and Rosh Chodesh are not considered holidays in the sense of a regular Yom Tov. They don't have a mitzvah simcha. Now, there's not a mitzvah of rejoicing with eating and drinking. And so that would be a reason that reciting Hallel is not a mitzvah that's connected specifically to joy. There are times when we say Hallel and it's not connected to joy. For example, Rosh Chodesh, there's no mitzvah of simcha on Rosh Chodesh. No mitzvah of, now, the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben is joy. However, the mitzvah of bris milah has some type of a distress or pain that detracts from the joy, and that is the pain that the child goes through. And so ultimately, that would answer why tzitzis and tefillin are not connected to simcha, the mitzvah of simcha. And so the truth is, Ezra is not here today, but Ezra had asked about the why don't you say a shachiyanu for a bar mitzvah? But according to this, there's no mitzvah of simcha. It seemed to answer Ezra's question. Maybe tomorrow when he comes, we'll remember to tell him the answer. This is Tosfos's answer, his first answer, that there's no mitzvah of simcha. If there's no mitzvah of simcha, you don't say shachiyanu. So basically, making tefillin, there's no mitzvah in making a tzitzis. There's no mitzvah of shachiyanu. Now comes to Tosfos's second way of understanding the differences between when you say shachiyanu and when you don't. And this is based on the opinion that that when you say a bracha, when the Gemara says to say a bracha on new utensils, so Rav Shri Ragoyin says that we don't follow that. And the reason is because we have a different Gemara in Eruvin that says that only on a mitzvah that's from time to time, only such a mitzvah do you recite Shachiyanu. Now, what does the Gemara say over there? It talks about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Do you say a Shachiyanu? So the Gemara over there says, yes, you say Shachiyanu for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Why? Because they are recited at specific times in the year. Rosh Hashanah is on the day of Rosh Hashanah, the first and second day of Tishrei. Yom Kippur, the 10th day of Tishrei. You do say Shachiyanu. When you buy a new house, a new clothing, a new car, a new this, whatever, something new, that's not on a specific time of the year. And therefore, if it's not at a specific time, you would not say Shachiyanu. Now, Tosfos says that's the reason why some holidays, why some places we say Shachiyanu, some we don't. Now, this opinion is Rav Shri Ragoyin's opinion. Rav Shri Ragoyin was from one of the great scholars after the Gemara was completed, but not necessarily does everyone agree with him. Many opinions, in fact, hold that you do say Shachiyanu on new clothes, and even if it's not based, but this is Rav Shri Ragoyin's understanding. And basically, what comes out here is that preparing tzitzis and tefillin are mitzvahs that do not have a specific time. They don't. They're not performed at specific times. The same thing as a bris milah is not performed at specific times. And even Hallel, which you would say, what do you mean? It is performed at specific times. We say it on Rosh Chodesh, we say it on Hanukkah, but no, even Hallel, it's instituted whenever we are saved from a calamity. And it's not necessarily at any specific time. And therefore, it deserves it doesn't have the rules of specific time type of a mitzvah. So things that are at specific times, that would be what requires a shehecheyanu bracha. And, and so what would that mean? That would mean that when you build your sukkah, when you put together your lulav, these are mitzvahs that are applicable at specific times of the year, and uh, um, they would be for those you would say a bracha, sukkah lulav, and the other holidays, Rosh Hashanah, you would say a bracha on the holidays, Shachiyanu, but any Megillah, Mikra Megillah, you would say a bracha because that's only on Purim. But Halef, the bracha, but the mitzvah of saying Hallel is not on a specific time. That would be the cutoff rule. This would be the policy for Shachiyanu brachas. Now, the only problem Taisus ends off here is, but I do have a question that I have to leave unanswered, and that is that Pidyon Haben. Let me just mute everyone here in a second. Pidyon Haben is not a specific time of the year. A Pidyon Haben is when you redeem your son when he's 30 days old. There's no specific time when that happens. That could be any day of the year when he reaches that age. So we don't have an answer why there is different that you would recite a Shachiyanu. We know a bris milah, you don't say Shachiyanu the way Taisus understands it. Now, this is the question Tosfos ends off with. The Ran wants to answer it. The Ran says the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben is contingent on the baby being at least 30 days. And Bris Milah is different because although you wait 8 days, however, if the circumcision was done before the 8th day, it's still valid after the fact. So circumcision, we can say, is not considered a mitzvah that's contingent on a specific time. But Pidyon Haben, because if it was done before 30 days, it's not valid. So you could say it's contingent on a specific time. So that's the way you could answer Tosfos. However, Tosfos is not happy with that answer. Why? Because Tosfos is saying it has to be on a specific day of the year, not just because it happened. The baby is at least 30 days old. It has to, that's the beginning time when you can do the Pidyon Haben. So Tosfos is not satisfied with Rav Shri Ragoin's way of understanding this differentiation. Okay, that gives us an understanding, and I think a little clarity on the bracha of Shehecheyanu. These are powerful, gemaras and taisus that we're learning. I mean, this is the inyanim that are connected to our, to regular mitzvahs that we're involved with. It's good to know what the rules are when they apply. Now, the next taisus mentions that when you enter the sukkah, you say leishev basukkah. So Taisus says, now you built a sukkah, you said Shachiyanu. You enter the sukkah. What's the story with maybe you should say a Shachiyanu for the holiday? So he says, but it doesn't say that. It says all you do say is the leishev basukkah. So Taisus asks, what about the fact that it's a holiday? Pesach, you don't build a, you don't make a bracha when you make the matzah Shachiyanu. You don't Shavuos. You didn't say Shachiyanu yet. And what do we do on Pesach? We make a Shachiyanu for the holiday. So why doesn't it say for Sukkah that you say a Shachianu. For Pesach, you say a Shachianu. For Shavuos, we recite a Shachianu. The women say the Shachianu when they light candles. The men say the Shachianu in Kiddush. Why doesn't it say you enter the sukkah to dwell in it? You say Leishe Basukah and Shachianu. It should say both. So the Tosfos asks this question. All the other holidays, you say a bracha Shachianu on the holiday. And in continuation of Tosfos' 2 points in the previous Tosfos, either because of Simcha, it's a mitzvah of Simcha, so you should say Shachianu if these holidays, or because it's a mitzvah that's specific time, it's set on a specific time, there would be reason to say Shachianu. So Tosfos says maybe since the whole purpose of building your sukkah is because of the holiday, so you recited the bracha in the weekday, while you were building it. Nevertheless, that bracha goes on the holiday. That bracha still will be will go for the holiday, and it's good enough. And we do find such a concept that if you don't say Shachiyanu on the first day, you could still say it on the other days of Sukkot. So even though it's not the proper time, for reciting the Shechayana, which is the first day, you could still fulfill it on a later day. So there's reason to say that maybe if it's when you make the Sukkah, even though it's not Yom Tov, there's room to say that you could also say Shechayana before Yom Tov. Now, that's a little stretching it, that Tosfos. And the commentaries question this Tosfos. I could say Shechiyanu on the second day of Yom Tov. I could say it on the fifth day of Yom Tov. Okay, it's Yom Tov. It's a day of Simcha. It's a day of joy. It's a specific time. Wonderful. But if I said Shechiyanu 3 days before Sukkot because I built my Sukkah then, that's good enough that's going to cover my Shechiyanu on the holiday? And you bring a proof from the fact that I could say Shechiyanu on a different day of the holiday, that gives me a proof that I could say it 3 days before the holiday? Not exactly a very strong logical proof. There he's doing it on the holiday. So there is an understanding here that one of the commentaries wants to say that the blessing of Shechiyanu is not connected to the sanctity of the day, that it's prohibited to do malacha. Because if that was so, then you would not be able to say it on further days of the holiday when you're allowed to do work. So the Shechiyanu bracha is connected to not connected to the sanctity so much as the uniqueness of the day, by the fact that it has special mitzvahs. So one can recite the Shechiyanu as long as you're occupied with the mitzvahs of the day of the holiday. And you see that from the fact that Shechiyanu could be recited even on Kol HaMoed. And work is not forbidden. And so we see it's not dependent on the prohibition of doing work. So you could say that it's connected to the mitzvahs of the holiday. It can be recited even if one is connected, is involved with the mitzvahs before the holiday starts. It's connected to the mitzvahs of the holiday. Now, what are you going to say about Shavuos? Shavuos doesn't have any mitzvahs. So this is an interesting insight that one of the commentaries brings, that that Shechiyanu is connected to the mitzvahs of the holiday, or the uniqueness of the day, which is represented by the mitzvahs. But Shavuos doesn't have any special mitzvahs. So what are you going to say there? I guess you have to say that reciting Kiddush, the mitzvah of sanctifying the day, is the mitzvah of Shavuos. In other words, it's not a unique mitzvah over other holidays. It doesn't have, but it does have a uniqueness. It's not the prohibition of work that's causing Shechianu. It's the element of the fact that the thing is, no, Kiddush shouldn't be it, because Chol HaMoed, you could say the bracha, you could say Shechianu. So I don't know if Kiddush would be good enough. Now on Pesach, what are you going to say? That you could say Shechianu. Let's wait till we get to 47b, and maybe we'll come back to this to think about this, because if that's where it mentions about, you didn't say the bracha, and one day you could say it later. And how would that work with Pesach? So because you have a mitzvah, like what's the mitzvah of Pesach? Eating matzah, that you're prohibited in eating chametz? Is that the mitzvah? The fact that you're prohibited in eating chametz, it makes it the uniqueness of the day. So in other words, it's not the prohibitions of the holiday, but it's the prohibition of chametz. And so what will you say with Shavuos? It's not the prohibitions of doing work, but it's some uniqueness of the holiday. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to think about this and see if maybe other commentaries talk about this. But this is the way they want to explain the Tosfos, because otherwise Tosfos is a little stretch. Yes, Jeffrey, you've been trying to say some things. I'm sorry, I didn't call on you. Yes, so you're muted. So to unmute yourself so we could hear you.
I've thought for years about these things, and I gave a talk recently in my own synagogue about the word for time in the Torah, because there's several different kinds of words for time. But I'm not going to go over all of that. But all of those that you quoted so far now have left out a very important feature, and that is when we have a new fruit in the right season, we also say Shechianu, because Shechianu has to do with the season of the year. It doesn't have to do with a specific day. And so with the institution of the bris and the pidyon ben, the problem was that many children died very early. And if a baby dies, a baby boy dies, we still perform the mitzvah of circumcision before that we bury. And so this is why bris milah does not have shechianu. But because if the baby survived 30 days, then from then on, this is the simcha. And it's a seasonal thing. And so then the baby is official, the baby has a better chance to survive. And that's why we say the shechianu, we delay the shechianu. It's about the whole season, the whole process. Same thing with fruits. It's not a specific day, but it's when the season comes, it's the right time. And then there's joy from having these new things that are growing. That's an agricultural country, agricultural society. In the case of Shavuos, it's the end of the Omer. We counted 7 weeks. We got through the whole grain harvest. It's more than one grain. It comes at different times. And then it says in the Torah, Mincha Chadashah LaHashem. It's the only place it says Mincha Chadashah, because with the Shavuos. The other holidays, it doesn't say that. So it's the simcha of completing this period of the year, and the simcha is over. And added to it, the rabbi said, and we don't know the exact day, but we celebrate the miracle of receiving the Torah on Har Sinai, and they linked it together. And the case of Sukkah is again, it's the entire season that we're celebrating. So if you say Shechianu earlier, it's okay, because you're already celebrating the season by building the Sukkah. But then generally what the rabbis like to do is to systematize things so that it's not so complicated. And so they brought them together. So if you don't say it when you first take the first fruit, then you could do it with the second fruit. And if you don't say it when you shake the lulav the first time, you could say it the next time. But generally speaking, it makes it easier, systematize it. Wherever the Jews are, they have different seasons for different things. So you put it together with Kiddush.
So let me just stop you there because you're saying such beautiful words of wisdom, but it's I just want to organize these thoughts. So the first point about what you said about the Pidyon Haben and Bris Milah, very interesting. So Yashakayach, that's a very interesting insight there, that the bris is, the sadness is not only because the pain of the child, but there's also an element of that a bris is performed even on a child that passes away at birth, which was common in those days, and therefore they didn't recite Shachianu then. Very interesting point. I have to see if they brought in comment. I guess you're quoting some sources from it. You probably saw that quoted in different places, or you just came up with that.
I didn't say Shri Ragan understands, but they didn't get. He doesn't. Don't let him speak more. He did because he didn't talk about the fruits or about the tragedy of birth in so many cases. It's not only the baby; it's all the mothers died also.
Right. Wow. But anyway, but that's your own. This is your own insight. This is not. You didn't see this somewhere.
Yes, because
very nice.
Because I was very interested in the fact that we say, we make a special ceremony on the Friday night before the baby's bris. Okay, and we don't do that for a girl. See, because the girl is a Jew when she is born, but the baby is not. The baby boy is not a Jew when he is born. And I didn't see anybody say this. See, but once you perform the mitzvah of the circumcision, the baby is a Jew, even if he doesn't survive. And that's why we do it, even if the baby is dead. And it's a very important insight. And the way it's came to me was because of the Shalom Zacher that we say.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting.
But I learned about the fact that the mortality was something that people lived with, and we don't in the same way. We're very fortunate now.
Right. Okay. Now coming back to the other point that you were talking about regarding Shavuos. So you wanted to say that it's connected to either Matan Torah or to the Shtei Halecha, which is beautiful, both very nice insights. The only problem is, I don't know if you could say that first of all, Matan Torah was not always connected to Shavuos, because it could have fallen out on a different day. And in the Shtei Halechem, we don't do. So my question would be, reciting Shehecheyanu on Shavuos, if it's not connected if it's not connected because we don't do work, but it's more because of the mitzvahs of the day. So which mitzvah of the day are we referring to that causes us to want to say Shehecheyanu, to feel this like just joy? We're not doing the Shtei Alechem. We're not bringing, this is a special sacrifice that they brought. The two, the two breads, or the shnei seed, the special ceremony. And the thing is, we also don't. Also Pesach. What are you going to say about Pesach? It's the non-chametz, or is it the mitzvah of eating matzah, which is really only on the first night? The other days are rishus, and even there are some that say it's a mitzvah still to eat. It's not a regular mitzvah. It's like a mitzvah that you can fulfill. I don't know if that would be enough to say a Shehecheyanu. Anyway, we'll have to think about this further again. I'm not, unless you want to answer my questions to you about the Shtei Alechem and the Matan Torah.
I think that in the case of Pesach, it's the miracle of the Exodus. So UTS was right.
That miracle was really the first night, but you're going to say that's. But it's
we only say at the beginning. We only say in the beginning. We don't say the seventh night. We only say the beginning.
Right. We don't say at the seventh night. True.
Right.
And okay, so we'll have to see about right. Okay, fine. We'll have to see about the other day. Right. This is applicable for Sukkot. Right. Okay. You know what? So maybe that's the thing. Yeah, let's wait till 48, because maybe it's going to say there that only on Pesach you wouldn't say. I don't know if we say Shehecheyanu on the other day. What happens if you miss Shehecheyanu on the first 2 days of Pesach? Maybe you don't say Shehecheyanu on the other. You won't say it on the third day or the second day. All right, yeah, we'll have to see. Okay.
But Shavuos, we do accomplish counting 49 days. And you do finish the grain harvests, which were very, very important in the ancient times. So that's the
that could be a reason maybe
that's
to say
doesn't matter what day. It really doesn't matter what day. They counted the calendar, had to be fixed and all that.
It's a season. It's a season.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, you could say the Shechiyanu. Well, then you could say all of the holidays are based on a season.
Yes.
Not on the mitzvah. But we're trying to say that they're based on the mitzvahs. Well, that's what we were trying to say. That
but the Shechiyanu doesn't say Hashem Kedushanim b'mitzvah sov. It's the bracha of Zaman. So it's different from but when we say eat the matzah, we say Hashem Kedushanim b'mitzvah sov.
Bottom line is that the bracha that you say on building the sukkah, that shechiyanu covers you for the whole sukkah. That's bottom line that we're seeing here. And Taisus is bothered why, and Taisus concludes that shechiyanu is connected to the mitzvahs of the holiday, and in other words, and that's good enough. See, it's connected to the mitzvahs of the holiday because you could make it on the other days of the holiday. Oh, maybe the truth is Tyson doesn't spell it out what the reason is. I feel a below Yom Tov, he says. So you could say Zman kikasi machmas might. You could really say your pshat. You know what? Your pshat is a very good pshat. You could say that the holiday, it's all about the Shechiyanu is all about the holiday, and therefore this is the season. So you said it 3 days before. The only problem we're going to have is Pesach. Why do you only have 1 day to say it, or a few days? And here we're going to give you the whole Sukkot to say it. If it's a season, why is the season limited? So that might be a problem. But let's wait for 47b. That's where we'll discuss this, and maybe we'll come back to it. Okay. Now, the other Taisvis talks about whenever you touch your tefillin, it's a mitzvah to touch your tefillin, and that you won't remove your mind, take your mind off your tefillin. And it's learned from this mitzvah is learned from the tzitz. The Kohen Gadol wore a headband, and that headband that on his forehead, it says V'haya al mitzchay tamid. It should be on his forehead always. So rabbis learn that means that he should never divert his attention away from the tzitz. And what is the tzitz, which is this headband? What does it say on it? It has Hashem's name once. So the Gemara says, tzitz has Hashem's name once. And you're not allowed to divert your mind from it. Tefillin has Hashem's name many times. For sure, you should not divert your mind from tefillin. That's what the Gemara says. Now, the Gemara here said that whenever the rabbis of Rav Ashi's yeshiva would touch their tefillin, they would say a bracha. So Tosfos says, why would they say a bracha? So first of all, he says because the mitzvah to touch them, and it's connected to not diverting your thoughts from the tefillin, and it's learned from the tzitz. That tzitz only says Hashem's name once, and you can't divert your. So tefillin is a mitzvah, is such a mitzvah, and therefore. You would recite a bracha. Then Tosfos says, but what bracha do you recite? So Tosfos says, well, there is a concept that it says that the Westerners, it says in the Gemara, that the people who live in Eretz Yisrael, Ma'arava in the West, those in the West, meaning in those that live in Israel, it says that they would say a bracha when they removed their tefillin, lishmar chukah. Where would they? What was that based on? It was based on a pasuk that says, "V'shamarta sachuka hazois l'mayada miyam yamima." You should keep this choik, this statute of putting tefillin on from in its season, from day to day, from time. To keep this from each day, miyamim yamima, every day. So the Gemara understands, at least that opinion understands that there is a mitzvah of tefillin only by day and not by night. There's a discussion about this, but that view is that it only applies by day and not by night. And if that's according to that view, it means that you're obligated to take it off at night because it says the yamim yamima. You're not allowed to have it on at night. It's only by day. And so when you take it off at night, you would say a bracha. What would the bracha be? Not that we follow this, but there's a bracha according to that view, which is which the bracha would be lishmar chukav, to watch, to follow the chayk, that it has to be only by day. You're following that chayk, that it's only by day. So that's what the Gemara says, that you would say such a bracha. So Taisus is wondering, that bracha to keep the chayk of tefillin, maybe that would fit for putting when you touch the tefillin. So Taisus is bothered, like, how could you say a bracha lehaniach tefillin when you touch your tefillin? You didn't put the tefillin, you're not putting the tefillin on. So how could you say a bracha lehaniach? You're not putting it on now. You're just touching it and showing that you're not diverting your thoughts from it. So what bracha? So it would make sense. Tosha says maybe is that the bracha is lishmar chukav. You're keeping the statutes of tefillin, which is which is one of the laws of tefillin. We see such a bracha. So Tosha says maybe that would be the bracha that you would say when you touch the tefillin. And see, the people in Ma'arava, the people in the West, meaning in Eretz Yisrael, they held that you did a sin if you put it on at night. So in other words, it was when you took it off, you were doing a mitzvah, and that was the bracha that was recited, and therefore it would make sense to say maybe such a bracha. In other words, that bracha is applicable for fulfilling the laws of tefillin, either taking it off before it's time to before night. So the same thing would be when you touch it, you're fulfilling the statutes of tefillin, touching tefillin. Other commentaries don't like this. They don't see Tosfos' logic, because they understand that the obligation of tefillin to say this bracha is specifically connected to miyamim, that the chuka hazois mayada miyamim yamima, that it's from that this chayk is not a general law of tefillin. It's about the law of removing it at night. If it's specifically regarding the law of removing it at night, again, like, what is the meaning of you should keep this statute? So is it just the general concept? And in the same pasuk, it happens to mention about taking it off at night. So one of the laws of tefillin is not to have it at night. So we're fulfilling the statute of tefillin, and one of the laws is to take it off before it gets dark. So therefore, you would say the bracha lishma chutav for both. When you take it off before it gets dark, you can say that bracha as well when you touch the tefillin. You're doing another one of the chukim, statutes of tefillin. However, if you understand that it's not just a general mitzvah of lishmar chukav, we're keeping the statutes of tefillin, but it's a specific mitzvah for taking it off at night, then how do you connect that to touching the tefillin, that you say a bracha when you're touching the tefillin? It only applies when you remove it before night, not when you do other mitzvahs that are connected to tefillin. And that would be a reason why commentaries would disagree with this Tosfos and say you can't say the bracha lishma chukav for all types of situations of tefillin. It's specifically connected to that mitzvah of removing it at night. Tosfos understands it differently. Tosfos understands that you're removing the tefillin. You're removing the tefillin. It is one of the aspects of the statutes of tefillin, but there's many. Now, now there is another alternative, and it's a little surprising. Tosfos doesn't come up with this, and that is, what about the mitzvah of al mitzvahs tefillin? Maybe that bracha is the bracha you say when you touch the tefillin to show that you're not diverting your thoughts from tefillin. Say the bracha, there's a second bracha on tefillin, which is not only lahaniach tefillin, but there's another bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. So maybe that's the bracha that's recited. It doesn't say you're putting it on, and it's just connected to tefillin. It's for the tefillin. The mitzvah on the tefillin. It would seem appropriate to recite that bracha. So why doesn't Tosfos think of that option? Now, so that would be an alternative, and that's surprising that Tosfos doesn't consider that as an option. Okay, so that's these are these Tosfos. Then we spoke about the mitzvah of reciting the bracha on seeing candles that are lit. Raya ner Chanukah tzarich levarach. So Tosfos is bothered with, why don't you say this bracha when you see someone else shaking lulav, someone else eating in the sukkah? Say a bracha. We say a bracha when you see someone's candles for Chanukah lit. So what's the difference between lulav and sukkah and Chanukah? Now, we did say that we've explained that it only applies when you're not going to fulfill the mitzvah yourself. Okay. If you're not going to be doing the mitzvah yourself, so you say a bracha when you see someone else doing it. Fine. So if you're not going to do lulav or sukkah, maybe say a bracha when you see someone else doing it. So Tosfos says, no. Chanukah is connected. The reason for Chanukah is specifically there's an institution for seeing, is because it's Chadivos Hanes. There's a appreciation for the miracle. There's a special miracle that involves Chanukah, and because of that, cherishing, I think is the better word. The cherishing of the miracle of Chanukah. That's a reason for a special bracha when you see. And that bracha, you don't have other mitzvahs because you don't feel that cherishing of the miracle. And so because there's a cherishing of the miracle of Chanukah, so if someone's not lighting the menorah, they should still say this bracha on the appreciation or the cherishing of this mitzvah, of the miracle, the cherishing of this miracle, not the cherishing of the mitzvah, cherishing of the miracle of Chanukah. They should recite a bracha if you see. If you're not going to light the menorah, at least you should say the bracha when you see. So that's Tosfos' first reasoning about explaining this. Then Tosfos says that there's another reason. The other reason is that maybe the reason for this mitzvah that there's a lot of people who don't. There's many people who don't have a place, so they don't have a house, so they're not going to light the menorah, and because they are not going to be able to fulfill the mitzvah, therefore, either they're traveling or they don't own a house, so they're not going to be able to do this mitzvah. So therefore, the rabbis established an opportunity for them to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Chanukah candles. That's, this is a way to participate in the mitzvah because they're not able to. Now, what does that say about lulav and esrog? What does that say about mezuzah? When you see someone else doing mezuzah, you don't say a bracha. What do you mean? You don't have a house. You should say a bracha. when you see him doing a mezuzah, because you didn't have a house. The rabbi should have established a bracha just like they established a bracha for Hanukkah. So Taisa says that there's a big question from mezuzah on these on this understanding. Again, so Taisa gave two explanations, and so far he has a third explanation as well. But the Taisus gave two explanations. First one was because Hanukkah is all about Chavivos Hanetz, the cherishing of the miracle of Hanukkah, and that would be a reason to say the rabbis instituted a bracha for seeing candles that are lit. Excuse me, if you're not going to be able to light menorah, but you see other people that lit their menorah, you could say the bracha for seeing, and then Taisha says, but there's also maybe an explanation that has to do with the fact that the rabbis established here specifically because they wanted you to be part of the mitzvah, and if you might not have a house, you're not going to be able to do the mitzvah. So therefore, the rabbis made a special, like, you need a house, you need to have you need that in order to do this mitzvah. And I guess what Tosfos is saying is lulav and sukkah are much easier to come by. You don't have a house, that's a much more of a problem. The rabbis felt an obligation, there's a need to give you an option. The only issue Tosfos has with this is, what about mezuzah? Mezuzah is also based on a house. You don't have a house, you can't do mezuzah either. So the rabbis should have established when you see a mezuzah. That would be. So Taisus is then going to have a third answer. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow, Bez Hashem. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye, everyone.